July 16, 1945. A field outside Augsburg, Bavaria. The air hangs thick and still, smelling of pine needles, damp earth, and the faint, sour tang of too many people living too close together. For Liesel Schmidt, former Nachrichtenhelferin, the world has shrunk to the size of this enclosure. Her universe is defined by the sagging lines of barbed wire that glitter with morning dew, the splintery planks of the unpainted barracks, and the indifferent blue of the Bavarian sky. It is a world measured in footsteps, 40 from her bunk to the latrine, 110 to the soup kitchen, 380 along the perimeter fence. She has counted them all. The war is over, they say. The 1,000-year Reich is a ruin of ash and bone. But here, inside the wire of Prisoner of War Camp 7, the war continues in the hollow ache of her stomach and the relentless hum of uncertainty in her mind. She sits on the hard-packed dirt, her back against the rough wall of Barrack C, trying to mend a tear in her uniform blouse. The thread is coarse, the needle clumsy in her fingers. Around her, the camp breathes with a listless, defeated rhythm. Women in faded gray uniforms move with the slow, shuffling gait of those who have nowhere to go and nothing to do. Their faces, once scrubbed clean and set with defiant pride, are now smudged with dirt and slack with exhaustion. They are a ghost army of secretaries, signal operators, anti-aircraft auxiliaries, and nurses, all swept up in the final, frantic collapse of Germany. They trade rumors in hushed tones, rumors of transfers to Siberia, of mass trials, of a vengeance as vast and terrible as the crimes of their leaders. Propaganda, once a roaring fire that warmed their certainty, now smolders in their memory, its toxic whispers telling them what to expect from the conquerors. They had been told the Americans were decadent, but the Russians were beasts. And who was to say the Americans would not simply hand them over? A jeep sputters along the dirt track outside the fence. At the wheel is Corporal Frank Niller, 20 years old, from a town in Ohio so small it barely registered on a map. He chews on a piece of straw, his M1 Garand resting in the passenger seat beside him. For Miller, the war is a different kind of memory. It's the smell of cordite in the Hergen forest, the whine of a mortar shell, the face of a friend who didn't make it to the next tree line. Guarding a camp full of German women feels surreal, a bizarre postscript to the fury and violence. He sees them through the wire, not as the fanatical ideologues from the training films, but as a collection of tired, hungry girls, some of them younger than his own sister. He sees their suspicion, the way they flinch when a truck backfires. He doesn't hate them. He is just tired. He wants to go home, drink a cold bottle of Coca-Cola, and forget the color of European mud. He pulls up to the administrative tent, where Lieutenant Davis is studying a supply manifest with a deep frown. Davis is a career officer, older than his men, with a practical mind that abhors waste and inefficiency. "Miller," he says, without looking up, "how are the prisoners?" Miller spits out the straw. "Quiet, sir. Same as always. Hungry." Davis taps the manifest with a pen. "I know they're hungry. We're all hungry. Supply says the next shipment of K-rations is delayed. We're feeding them what we're eating, and there's not enough of it. It's boiled potatoes and bread so hard you could use it to hammer a nail." He finally looks up, his gaze sweeping over the dusty camp and settling on the dense woods that border the eastern fence. "Bad morale leads to trouble, Corporal. Sickness, escape attempts, headaches I don't need." He squints at the trees, a thought forming in his mind. The woods were teeming with life. He'd seen them himself on patrol. Rabbits, dozens of them, darting through the undergrowth at dawn and dusk. It was an idea born of pure American pragmatism. He turns back to Miller, a new glint in his eye. "We're going to supplement the rations," he says, his voice low and decisive. "Get Sergeant Riley. Tell him to pick 4 men who can shoot straight. Grab your rifles and a dozen clips of ammo from the armory. We're going hunting." The afternoon sun beats down on the camp, baking the dust and drawing a shimmering haze from the metal roofs of the barracks. Inside Barrack C, the air is suffocating, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and stale fear. Liesel has given up on her mending. She lies on her thin straw mattress, staring at the raw timber of the ceiling, tracing the knots in the wood with her eyes. She is trying not to think, trying to exist only in this small, quiet space. But thought is a relentless tide. It brings images of her home in Dresden, a ghost city of rubble. It brings the face of her brother, his last letter postmarked from the Eastern Front 6 months ago. It brings the voice of the blocklighter, the party official, warning them of the unholy fate that awaited German women who fell into enemy hands. "They will defile you," he had screamed, his face contorted with patriotic rage. "They will use you and then they will discard you like trash." The quiet is shattered by a sudden, sharp crack. It is a sound Liesel knows intimately. Not the heavy, booming crump of an artillery shell or the stuttering cuff of a machine gun. This is the distinct, piercing report of a single rifle shot. Her body goes rigid. Every muscle clenches. Her eyes fly open, meeting the wide, terrified eyes of the girl in the bunk across from her. Another crack follows, closer this time. Then a third, methodical, spaced out. It is not the chaotic sound of a firefight. It is controlled, deliberate. You recognize the sound immediately. It's the sound of an execution. A wave of panic washes through the barracks. Women who were sleeping bolt upright. Conversations die in mid-sentence. Someone near the door lets out a choked sob. Magda, an older woman with a face as hard as splintered wood, scoffs. "It is nothing," she rasps, her voice a low growl. "Probably the guards, shooting at rats." But her hands are trembling as she says it. The rifle shots continue, a steady, rhythmic punctuation to the suffocating silence. Crack, a pause. Crack, another pause. Crack. Each report lands like a physical blow, tightening the knot of terror in Liesel's stomach. Her mind races, desperately seeking another explanation. A training exercise? Target practice? But why here? Why now? The propaganda whispers return, louder now. They are making examples of us. They are weeding out the party members. They are starting with the women from the other compounds. Her heart hammers against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady rhythm of the gunfire. She pictures a line of women, their backs to a freshly dug ditch, a line of American soldiers raising their rifles. The image is so vivid, so horribly plausible, that she has to squeeze her eyes shut to block it out. The sound is inescapable. It echoes off the trees, seeming to come from all directions at once. It feels like judgment, cold and final. Outside the wire, Corporal Miller kneels in the tall grass, the stock of his M1 Garand pressed firmly against his shoulder. "Hold still, you little devil," he mutters under his breath. He leads it by a foot, exhales slowly, and squeezes the trigger. The rifle bucks against him, and the rabbit tumbles head over heels. "Got one," he calls out to Sergeant Riley, who is positioned 50 yards to his left. The hunt is going well. The men are relaxed, enjoying the break from the monotony of guard duty. For them, the gunshots are a sport, a means to an end, a way to get a decent meal for themselves and for the prisoners. They are focused on the rustle of leaves, the twitch of a rabbit's ear, the simple, satisfying challenge of marksmanship. They are utterly oblivious to the psychological storm they have unleashed just a few hundred yards away, on the other side of the barbed wire. Inside Barrack C, another shot rings out, and a young woman begins to recite the Lord's Prayer, her voice trembling and thin. Liesel joins her, the familiar words a fragile shield against the terrifying certainty that they are next. The gunfire ceases as abruptly as it began, but the silence that follows is heavier, more terrifying than the noise it replaced. It is a charged, waiting silence, filled with the frantic pulse of 200 hearts. In Barrack C, the women are frozen, huddled together in small groups on their bunks, their faces pale masks of dread. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind whistling through the cracks sounds like a footstep, a prelude. Liesl sits with her knees drawn up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around her legs, as if she could make herself smaller, invisible. The Lord's Prayer has died on her lips. Prayer feels useless now, a child's plea against an iron reality. They have finished with the others. Now it is their turn. Her mind is a maelstrom of fragmented memories and half-forgotten warnings. A newsreel showing smiling American soldiers handing out chocolate to French children. A radio broadcast detailing the Allied firebombing of German cities. A political officer lecturing her unit of signal auxiliaries. "Do not be fooled by their smiles or their candy," he had said, his voice ringing with conviction. Beneath the mask of the liberator is the face of the destroyer. They see you not as women, but as spoils of war, as symbols of a defeated people to be broken and humiliated. She had believed him then. How could she not? His certainty was a rock in a sea of chaos. Now his words echo in the terrifying silence, no longer a warning, but a prophecy being fulfilled. Magda, the cynic, is no longer scoffing. She stands by the single, grimy window, peering through a crack in the blackout paper, her body rigid. "What do you see?" a young girl whispers from a nearby bunk. Magda doesn't turn. Nothing. The guards are on their usual patrol. Nothing has changed. But her voice lacks all conviction. It is the lie you tell yourself when the truth is too monstrous to contemplate. Nothing has changed, yet everything has. The world has tilted on its axis. The bored American guards, once just a feature of the landscape, are now transformed in their minds. Their casual stances seem menacing, their garands not just tools of their job, but instruments of death. The way one of them lights a cigarette seems impossibly cruel, a mundane act performed on the edge of an atrocity. An hour crawls by, each minute stretching into an eternity. The sun begins to dip lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the compound. The women speak only in whispers, their words swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. They are caught in a state of suspended terror, a nightmare from which they cannot wake. They have been stripped of everything, their homes, their cause, their freedom. Now, they believe, their lives are about to be taken as well. Liesl finds herself thinking of trivial things. The taste of her mother's Apfelstrudel, the feel of clean sheets on a Sunday morning, the weight of her brother's hand on her shoulder. These small, perfect memories are suddenly precious, incandescent, moments of a life she is about to lose. A profound, hollow sadness settles over her, displacing even the fear. This is how it ends, not in a blaze of glory on the battlefield, but in a dusty, anonymous camp, executed by faceless enemies for reasons she can no longer fully comprehend. Then, a new sound, distinct, unmistakable. It is the sound of heavy boots on the gravel path leading to their barracks. More than one person. The crunching is steady, purposeful. It is followed by the low murmur of male voices, speaking English. The women look at each other, a collective, silent scream passing between them. This is it. The squad has come for them. The whispers cease. The last vestiges of hope evaporate. There is no more doubt, only a cold, stark certainty. The boots stop directly outside their door. A shadow falls across the threshold. The heavy wooden bar on the outside of the door scrapes loudly as it is lifted. The latch clicks. The door to Barrack C swings inward with a low groan, flooding the dim interior with the golden light of the late afternoon. The women recoil as one, a single terrified organism shrinking from the glare. They press themselves against the far wall, into the deepest shadows of the bunks, their faces a mixture of stark terror and numb resignation. Two figures stand silhouetted against the bright doorway, American soldiers, the executioners. One is tall and broad-shouldered, Sergeant Riley. The other is younger, leaner, Corporal Frank Miller. Liesl's breath catches in her throat. Her mind screams, but her body is paralyzed. She can only watch, waiting for the command, for the rough hands that will drag her outside. But the command never comes. The soldiers don't raise their rifles. They don't shout. They hesitate in the doorway, their eyes adjusting to the gloom. Miller is holding 2 large, lumpy burlap sacks, the kind used for potatoes. Riley carries 2 more. The sacks are stained with dark, wet patches. Blood. The sight confirms their worst fears. These must be body bags, or sacks to carry away their belongings after they are gone. The soldiers step inside, their boots loud on the wooden floorboards. The smell that enters with them is not the clean, metallic scent of gun oil and steel they expected. It is something else. It is raw, earthy, and undeniably feral. It is the smell of a butcher shop. The women stare, their minds struggling to process what they are seeing. The soldiers look awkward, uncomfortable. This is not the cold, professional demeanor of a death squad. Riley mutters something to Miller in English, his voice low and gruff. Miller nods, his young face etched with a kind of nervous concern. He glances at the huddled, silent women, his expression unreadable. He seems more like a boy delivering bad news than an angel of death. He walks to the central wooden table that serves as their communal dining space and, with a grunt, upends one of the burlap sacks. There is a soft, wet thud as the contents spill out. It is not what any of them expected. Not boots, not clothes, not instruments of torture. It is meat, a pile of pale, skinned carcasses, long ears, powerful hind legs, rabbits, dozens of them. Riley empties his 2 sacks, and the pile grows, a small mountain of fresh meat on their grimy table. The women are stunned into absolute silence. The disconnect between their terror-fueled expectations and the bizarre reality in front of them is too vast to bridge. They stare at the rabbits, then at the soldiers, then back at the rabbits. The air is thick with confusion. Corporal Miller clears his throat. He knows a few words of German, phrases he picked up from a Berlitz book and from interacting with civilians. He points a finger at the pile of meat, then gestures broadly at the women. Essen, he says, the word clumsy on his tongue. Food. He taps his own chest. Soldaten, hunt. He makes a motion of raising a rifle to his shoulder. For you. He searches for the right words. Für Sie. Extra, Essen. Extra food. The words hang in the silent room. Extra food. For you. Liesel stares at him, at his earnest, slightly flushed face. The gunshots, the methodical, terrifying gunshots that had been the soundtrack to their impending doom. It wasn't an execution. It was a hunt. They weren't killing prisoners. They were killing rabbits. For them. The realization dawns on her, so immense and so utterly contrary to everything she had braced herself for, that it makes her feel dizzy. The fear that has held her in its iron grip for hours doesn't just recede, it shatters, leaving a profound, hollow emptiness in its wake. She looks from the pile of rabbits, so shockingly vividly real, to the face of the young American soldier. She sees no malice there, no cruelty, no vengeful conqueror. All she sees is a boy from Ohio, looking uncomfortable and out of place, trying to explain in broken German that he has brought them dinner. The entire architecture of her fear, built on a foundation of propaganda and rumor, collapses in a single, silent moment. Sergeant Riley gives a curt nod, his duty done. He and Corporal Miller back out of the barracks, leaving the women alone with the astonishing offering. The door closes, and the bar scrapes back into place, plunging the room back into its familiar dimness. But the atmosphere has been irrevocably altered. The thick, suffocating blanket of terror has been replaced by a silence of a different kind, one of profound, disorienting bewilderment. For a long moment, no one moves. They continue to stare at the pile of rabbits on the table, as if it might vanish, a collective hallucination born of hunger and fear. It is Magda who breaks the spell. She walks slowly to the table, her cynical facade cracked. She reaches out a hand, her fingers tracing the flank of one of the animals. Kaninchen, she murmurs, the word barely a whisper. Rabbits. She lets out a short, sharp breath that is half laugh, half sob. The great American execution! They were shooting rabbits! The absurdity of it washes over the room. The hours of cold dread, the whispered prayers, the silent goodbyes, all for nothing. A few of the younger women begin to cry, not from fear anymore, but from the overwhelming release of it. The tension that had held them rigid for hours drains away, leaving them weak and trembling. Liesel feels strangely hollowed out, as if a fundamental part of her has been scoured clean. The fear was real, the terror was absolute, but its cause was a phantom, a story they had told themselves, a lie they had been fed for years and had willingly consumed. The Americans were not the monsters from the newsreels. They were just men. Men who went hunting because their prisoners' rations were thin. The act was so simple, so practical, so devoid of the ideological hatred that had fueled the war. It was an act of basic, unexpected humanity. Slowly, as if waking from a long dream, the women begin to move. Someone finds a knife. Another brings a bucket of water from the washroom. Their movements are clumsy at first, then more certain. They work together, cleaning and preparing the meat. The grim silence gives way to the mundane, functional sounds of work. The rhythmic chop of a knife, the splash of water, the low murmur of conversation. They are not talking about the war, or their fate, or the guards. They are talking about recipes, about how their mothers used to stew rabbit with onions and herbs. They are rebuilding a small piece of a normal world in the heart of their prison. As dusk settles over the camp, the smell that drifts from Barrack C is no longer the sour scent of fear. It is the rich, savory aroma of roasting meat, a smell none of them have experienced in months, perhaps years. They gather around the table, sharing the meal from their tin plates. The rabbit stew is thin, made with little more than water and a few scavenged wild herbs, but to them, it tastes like a feast. Each bite is a refutation of the propaganda, a quiet dismantling of the hatred they had been taught to feel. It is more than just sustenance for their bodies, it is a balm for their spirits. Later that night, Liesel lies on her bunk, listening to the soft breathing of the sleeping women around her. She is no longer tracing the knots in the ceiling. She is thinking about the young soldier's face, his awkward German, his simple explanation. Für Sie, for you. An act of kindness from an enemy is a disorienting thing. It doesn't fit into the neat, brutal categories of war. It complicates everything. It suggests the world is not as simple as she was told, that people are not just symbols of their nations, but individuals capable of cruelty and compassion in equal measure. She turns her head to look out the small, grimy window. Through the barbed wire, she can see the silhouette of a guard on patrol, his rifle slung over his shoulder. A few hours ago, he was a figure of pure terror. Now, he is just a man, walking his post under a sky full of distant stars. The wire is still there, the future is still unknown, but the fear is gone, replaced by a fragile, terrifying, and unmistakable flicker of hope.